Praising and thanking God yet again for endurance. This is a chapter that helps us understand that sometimes endurance can be complicated. So let's call this one sharing in wrongdoing, because there's going to seem to be a split between people and quite possibly the saints, who are, at least according to the power of one of these rulers that we will see foreseen in this chapter, who will actually seduce some of the saints to at least compromise or follow him. In this chapter, we're in King Darius's first year. Daniel will arise to strengthen him, presumably by telling him some of the things that will follow, even though it doesn't seem specific as to how he will strengthen him. It will go on to say that 3 more kings will arise in Persia, but a 4th will arise and grow far or seemingly far richer. He will contend with Greece, even though a mighty king will be broken into 4 others, in what seems to be a familiar pattern of a great king of Greece giving way to 4 smaller rulers in that nation. The chapter, to me, once again, gets a lot more hazy from there. And I don't think it's just me, because when I looked up maps trying to describe the kingdoms that follow, they don't seem to agree, even though there are a large number of them that seem to think that what will be described as a battle between the kings of the north and the kings of the south will describe the kings of the north as one of the Greek kingdoms. I don't know, but I'm going to try to give you a short summary of what seems to be a protracted back and forth struggle between the kings of the north and the kings of the south. As it will say, that kingdom that is broken into 4 others will in some way seem to contend with the kings of the south. In one of those kingdoms, a prince will grow stronger than the rest, at which point they will seem to strike an alliance, the kings of the north and the kings of the south, but it is an alliance that will not last. Understanding that war between the descendants of the rulers of the south and the north will continue. They will again seem to reach peace for a while, but the peace will not last, as one of the kings will rage and reignite the conflict. I'm speaking from my notes this time, not the text, so I think it is the kings of the south prevail for a while, going back with some spoil or victory back to Egypt. However, one of the kings of the north is going to seek revenge, igniting the conflict again, as we mentioned. The south, however, will contend and resurge against them. The north will fight back, as will many, saying that even some of the contentious among the saints may join in the conflict, but they will fail until the king of the north again will prevail and then try to extend his success to the coast until a commander stops what I think is described as his insolence, turning it back on him, at which point an official will administrate the things of the business or matters of the kingdom for a while. However, that official will be replaced by a schemer who will seem to dominate most of the rest of the chapter. And as I mentioned, most of what I'm saying is coming from my notes, but at this point, I may switch back and forth between some things I would like to emphasize, in particular from the text dealing with our theme for today. But he's going to be replaced by a schemer who will rise by flattery in general. He will have an alliance that he will break, and he will basically succeed through, I guess, the partnership with a small band, or I guess what would be considered a smaller band than usual, of those who are assisting or helping him make moves. It seems that they're talking about one of the kings of the north, because it'll talk about how he will still have success resurging, or I guess once again, waging battle or conflict again against the kings of the south, who will find themselves, or the king of the south who will find himself betrayed, at which point 2 kings will come together bent on doing evil. It does not sound or describe clearly whether or not they are bent on doing evil in partnership, or whether or not they are contending against one another, but they will both contend through dishonesty, but it will come to no avail. As it is going to say, at the appointed time, he will go against the south again. In this conflict, however, he will not necessarily prevail in conquering the south, but it will seem like he will take away much spoil, or he will not go away empty-handed. However, not necessarily conquering the south, he will turn his attention to those among God's people who seem to forsake the covenant, or the covenant with their God. A point I want to pick up from the text where verse 30 will say, he shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. It doesn't seem like it's those who were never a part of the holy covenant. It seems like it is quite possibly people of God who have forsaken the covenant. Verse 32 going on to say, he shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. Bad news is, as we've seen with some of these other kingdoms, if this is a kingdom that is distinct from the ones we have seen persecuting the saints before, he is going to be given the power, like those previous kingdoms, to prevail over the saints. This time, however, it is going to say in verse 34, when they stumble, they shall receive a little help. Good news. Seeming super similar to something we might see in Revelation chapter 11 with the two witnesses. Understanding, as we mentioned before, even though these are time-specific prophecies, these are eternal principles that may not be limited to the nations he is talking to or talking about specifically at this point. Might have nothing to do with Revelation 11 or the Revelation at all, but it might. So going on, he is going to talk about the way that, once again, some of the wise, even among the people, will stumble, as the part I left out of verse 34 is going to say, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. That's after they receive a little bit of help. So it seems not only shall this unrighteous leader seduce some of the saints who have forsaken the covenant once they have gotten help, there are those who with pretense will weave themselves into the saints who might experience a little bit of a resurgence or protection from whatever it was that they were facing, saying in verse 35 that some of the wise among them shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. Understanding that that whole concept of the time of the end can refer to the end of all things, but it also refers to the end of certain era, or the era of some of these kingdoms. Verse 38, I think it is, going on to say, look, 36 going on to say, and the king shall do as he wills, and shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every God. Going on to say in verse 37, for he shall magnify himself again above all. Going on then to say in verse 39, those who acknowledge him, he will load with honor. The rest of the chapter is saying that, much like the rest of these kingdoms, though, if he is not described as a leader of a kingdom that we have seen before, he's going to go the same way. This is still going to be a temporary rise of a great power that falls, again, the last verses of the chapter, saying that he is a leader who will fall with no one to